UN warns the Taliban maintains close ties to Al-Qaeda, and the country could once again become a breeding ground for international terrorists.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
The Taliban, fearing a change in policy, had a clear message for the new US president. Joe Biden has just been elected. Do you think that could potentially change the situation?
The Joe Biden لپاره د موږ مشران دا ده چې د ټرمپ تګلاره خپله کو خپل عسکر وباسي د ملک نه نور د نه ځان خوږوي نه د خپل ملک اقتصاد خرابوي چې هغه بله چاره هم نه لري.
But you're now no longer fighting against American soldiers. You're fighting against people who believe in the same book as you, who are the same religion as you. You're fighting against your brothers.
نو کوم د شهر مطابق قوانین که دا حکومت ومینې موږ د دې سم کوم ستونزه نه لرو. امریکایانو سم کومه ستونزه چې هواره شوې هغه په دې شکل ده چې دی به په موږ غرض نه لري موږ به په دې غرض نه لرو. صرف هغه یوه د وتلو لار هم دوی ته ورکړې ده چې دی په یعنې په امن کې ووځي. دی په لاس جوړ شوی نظام په افغانستان کې اوس چلیږي.
Was that a message or a threat?
د موږ خبر هم ورته هم دا دی اخطار هم همدا دی. که دا جنگ زیاتوي نو موږ د جنگ او د جهاد لپاره بالکل آماده یو. موږ په جهاد باندې نه ستړي کېږو، په زخمو باندې نه غمجن کېږو، په شهادت باندې نه دردېږو. موږ که شهیدان شوم کامیاب یو، که په ستړي وم کامیاب یو، که په جنگ کې وم کامیاب وو. موږ په فاتحانه توګه کابل ته انشاءالله ننوځو. دا د موږ لار او کامیابي ده.
All right, that was a clip from Vice. We're going to be talking today with our good friends Djene and Kuba. You'll have to excuse us. We were having some technical difficulties beforehand. But was it a few Saturdays ago, we had a long 5-hour show where we kind of talked a little bit about the Afghanistan papers and this forever war in Afghanistan and why we're never going to leave. And I think it's been going on for about 20 years now. We forget that the mission was clear. We had to crush Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization behind one of the most gruesome attacks on the continental U.S. They were said to be taking refuge in Afghanistan, and we were going to smoke them out of their caves. In 2003, George Bush had said that our mission was accomplished. But here we are about some 20 years later, still in Afghanistan. This has been a bipartisan affair. President Obama did not get us out of Afghanistan when he said he would. And now here we are coming up on the May 1st deadline that we were given, or that Donald Trump gave us to have all the troops out of Afghanistan. So let me bring on my co-hosts. Coming all the way live from Miami, Florida, Pascal Robert. How are you?
My brother, my man, Jason Miles. How are you feeling, comrade?
Not good. Not good. This is a technical difficulty.
I'm sorry to hear that. Are you physically not feeling well, or are you just annoyed?
No, I really hate technology. And coming all the way live from Springfield, Missouri, he's got a crew of fans called Degenerates. Mean Gene Bajalan.
Hey everybody, how are you guys doing this evening?
Mean Gene, my favorite Kurd, perhaps the only Kurd I know.
Favorite Kurd, what's the word?
I will take it, Pascal. I'll take it. If I'm the only one.
If you want to say I'm your favorite Haitian American or favorite Haitian, that's okay. You have that license.
Okay, yeah, you are my favorite Haitian American. I'm trying to think.
Hold on, we got to before you guys have fucking tea and crumpets, we got to introduce the last guy. Coming at us live from somewhere we can't say where he's coming from because it's so secret, because he's so deep in the deep state. The man with the last name we shall not pronounce because it's unpronounceable. Kuba!
With the long last Polish name.
Kuba Wrzesniewski. That much I can reveal. I cleared it with my security officer. And I can tell you that I'm in sub-basement 7B, but I cannot tell you which building it is.
Sub-basement Canon B, did you say?
7B.
It's so secret because damn it, somebody turned their thing down.
That wasn't me.
Whose audio's too loud?
Might be Kuba's.
I did want to read this. This is from the Afghanistan papers. I want to get Kuba's take on this. Diplomats and military commanders acknowledge they struggle to answer simple questions. Who is the enemy? Whom can we count on as allies? How will we know when we've won? Their strategies differed, but Bush and Obama both committed early blunders that they never recovered from, according to the interviews. After a succession of quick military victories in 2001 and early 2002, Bush decided to keep a light force of U.S. troops in Afghanistan indefinitely to hunt suspected terrorists. Soon, however, he made plans to invade another nation, Iraq, and Afghanistan quickly became an afterthought. James Dobbins, a career diplomat who served as special envoy for Afghanistan under Bush and Obama, told government interviewers it was a hubristic mistake that should have been obvious from the start. He said, first, sort of just invade only one country at a time. I mean that seriously, Dobbins said, according to a transcript from his remarks. They take a lot of high-level time and attention and will overload the system if we do more than one of these at a time. By the time Obama took office in 2009, al-Qaeda had largely vanished from Afghanistan, but the Taliban had made a comeback. Obama tore up Bush's counterterrorism strategy and approved a polar opposite plan, a massive counterinsurgency campaign backed by 150,000 U.S. and NATO troops, as well as tons of aid for a weak Afghan government. In contrast with Bush, Obama imposed strict deadlines and promised to bring home all U.S. troops by the end of his presidency. But Obama's strategy was also destined to fail. U.S., NATO, and Afghan officials told government interviewers that it tried to accomplish too much, too quickly, and depended on an Afghan government that was corrupt and dysfunctional. Is Kuba still there?
I'm here.
Kuba's here.
Can you?
So is that a pretty accurate description, in your opinion, of what did and is going on?
So when the decision was made initially to invade Afghanistan, it was a calibrated and deliberate response to the September 11th attacks. Once Osama bin Laden was identified as the mastermind behind it, then his whereabouts were traced to Afghanistan. He had been a guest of the Taliban government for quite some time. The Taliban were issued an ultimatum to hand him over or risk invasion. They cited Islamic custom as their reason that they could not, in good conscience, extradite a fellow mujahideen. And then the military invasion began, and it was closely confined to tracking down the leadership of the Taliban, tracking down al-Qaeda fighters, al-Qaeda installations, and eventually driving them out from southern Afghanistan. Of course, Osama bin Laden ends up in Pakistan. You don't actually get the guy. Mullah Omar is on the run, leader of the Taliban. He survives the U.S. invasion as well. The Taliban, as an organization, go on to fight another day. But that was that, right? Mission accomplished by 2002, 2003, certainly. However, the question then comes up, what happens next with Afghanistan? And there was an awareness that during the Cold War, when the United States supported the Mujahideen against the Soviet-backed government in communist government in Kabul, that they hadn't paid attention to the end game, that they had just kind of spiked the football in the end zone, done a little dance, and went home. And as a result, the country was torn apart by infighting between different Mujahideen warlords. And eventually, giving the rise to the conditions that allowed the Taliban to take over much of the country and turn it into this stronghold of Islamic fundamentalism, Sunni extremism. So they wanted to avoid that. And they began to organize a national government in Afghanistan, something to replace the Taliban. But it's kind of like, good luck with that. Afghanistan has not had a unified national government probably since Genghis Khan. Prior to the Soviet invasion to support their communist clients, the country at best had a government in Kabul that could claim jurisdiction over the territory of Afghanistan, but in practice had extraordinarily limited influence beyond the territory where the ruler personally had connections, dynastic connections, tribal connections, patronage with powerful local elites. Areas where that didn't exist were essentially outside of his control, and you have people paying lip service to the notion that there's some king or some prime minister or some president in Kabul that nominally is in charge of the entire country, but effectively there was no unified Afghanistan. So the United States was going to build one from scratch just because that's what you do when you win a war. They found Hamid Karzai as a candidate that was supposed to be someone who could cross ethnic, sectarian lines to create that kind of stability that would allow a unified government to take hold. And of course, it never did. And one major mistake made early on was a refusal to negotiate with the Taliban, because the Taliban knew that they were defeated, but they also knew that they had a legitimate connection with certain large communities across the Pashtun South, that they were trusted as real representatives, real leaders of that group. Other areas, less so, but there was a substantial constituency that was pro-Taliban. And so the Taliban imagined that, okay, you beat us fair and square, so we're not going to be in charge of Afghanistan anymore. Osama bin Laden's gone, so that's off the table. So, where do we fit in? Are we going to be a political party? Are we going to have to go through some electoral hoops? Are you going to just hand us a bunch of provincial governorships? But come on, let's make a deal. And the United States refused because they were evildoers. And instead, the United States was going to support government without any Taliban elements and then crush the Taliban militarily. And how did that turn out? So that strategy, that attempt to make real that bullet point plan for post-war Afghanistan has been going on for the last 20 years. There's always been this kind of deadline, like sophomore type, just give me one more day, professor. I promise, right? I'll have the essay done, just 24 more hours. Whenever there's been an accountability moment for the generals and the leadership that have been administering the occupation, where just around the corner, the next 6 months, we're going to get this right in time for the next election. Okay, maybe the next election. And there's also been a shift in the justification for what the American mission is even supposed to be doing in Afghanistan. It began as a kind of drain the swamp operation. We're going to go in, we're going to get rid of these extremists, and then we're going to leave. And maybe they come back, maybe they don't. But the point is to get the ones that are out there, not to try to fundamentally alter the political and social circumstances of this country that is on the other side of the world and has a completely foreign and unknown culture to us and a breathtakingly low level of development, breathtakingly high incidence of poverty, where everybody has PTSD and the average age is somewhere in the teens. But, and here's the thing, right? Like when you convene the State Department and the NGO types and the international relations specialists, first of all, there's very few that know anything about Afghanistan, but all of them come into the room. And there's a checklist of what any American-sponsored government should be. And this is a case of somebody getting high on their own supply. You know, the United States tells other governments that you need to observe women's rights. Women's rights are human rights. You need to be a democracy. You need to have competitive elections. You need to observe the rights of religious minorities. You need to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So you have this checklist of requirements, which no government in Afghanistan has ever met. And the people of Afghanistan don't even expect to enjoy. But since this is an American project, you can't be creating Taliban light or a different, you know, kinder, gentler Islamic Republic. You have to be creating basically Norway. And it turns out that that's really hard.
We don't even have here.
Yeah, exactly. Like the United States would have trouble reconstructing the United States to fit the requirements of the United States. And so as soon as they made that shift, they were set up to fail. And when successive governments, first the Obama administration, the Trump administration came into office, there was a lot of political momentum to end the war in Afghanistan. But with Obama, the notion that the Afghanistan war was a good war, the right war. Here we were unambiguously in the right. We were going after the guys who did 9/11, and we were the white hats. That bought some breathing room for the occupation. And there was the recent experience in Iraq with the surge in late 2007, 2008, where it seemed as though a massive influx of American troops, American money, American attention had let Iraq turn the corner and start stabilizing around this post-Saddam, you know, kinder, gentler, pro-American political orientation, which would let the United States achieve, you know, like a very Nixonian peace with honor. And if we did that in Iraq, let's at least try doing that in Afghanistan. That's what Obama was sold on, and he followed through with it. Massive involvement of massive increase of troops, massive increase of resources, and the whole idea, a lot like Vietnamization during the Indochina Wars. We're going to stabilize a pro-American local government that can take care of the fight. But we just got to stand up a good one, you know, train them to shoot straight, train them to stand and fight, give how to use all this amazing equipment, all of these great toys that we're going to hand them over. And then they'll be great, and then we can leave, and it won't be chalked up as a loss in our column, as long as they can hold on for 6 to 8 months. But it turns out that they never even managed to make it that far, despite just hundreds of billions of dollars spent trying to arm and stand up capable Afghanistan security forces. When Trump comes in, the way that the military-industrial complex, the way that the sort of generals and think tank policy hawks work the president is different. It's not, well, we have to stabilize this country, think about human rights, responsibilities, statecraft. We've got a great policy here. You know, Obama loves to meddle with metrics and deadlines and milestones, all of the managerial, professional tools of, you know, PowerPoint and Excel are supposed to be the hallmarks of effective policy. With Trump, they just told him, are you a pussy? Are you going to let them win? I thought America was going to win. So, let's drop some giant bombs. Let's scare them, and show them that what we've got, and then we can make a deal from a position of strength. And the first few years was shaking up the Taliban. I remember he dropped the mother of all bombs on some location in Afghanistan, just as a demonstration of kind of shock and awe, 3.0. The Taliban, of course, were not impressed. But in the end, in the 11th hour, to try to salvage at least exit from Afghanistan, and also to leave a bit of a poison pill in case he didn't get reelected, Trump signs a deal in Doha with the Taliban, one which is actually pretty favorable from the Taliban perspective. The Taliban gets their preconditions, the United States doesn't get theirs.
No, hold on for a second, Kuba. Hold on for a second, Kuba. Did you want to add something in there, Djene?
Oh no, I was just gonna add to that. One of the other reasons that they can sustain this war in the United for 20 years, unlike, for example, the war in Vietnam, is that the United States does not have a general draft during this period, and consumer spending continues. During the Bush years, there's the economic crisis and recovery. So the entire social cost of the war, which made it difficult to sustain the Vietnam War, does not exist in the case of Afghanistan. You just basically have the rotation in and out of successive generations of sort of economic conscripts and people from people from military families going in, and so the cost of the Afghanistan war is very heavy, but it's only on a certain proportion of society. So it becomes an abstract issue to most Americans, something that happens, something that you can forget about, and it's not in the national consciousness for an extended period of time. So I think, inside America, the fact that the cost of war is borne by a minority of the population means that allows American politicians, both Bush, Obama, and Trump, room to maneuver and sort of experiment. That none of this Afghanistan policy was really thought out. I think Kuba explained it quite clearly. But what a lot of people don't forget, a lot of people forget, is that George W. Bush.
I think Gene's caught in the matrix.
He froze.
I think
like the NSA flipped the switch.
The deep state got him. Everybody's having Wi-Fi problems today because of the deep state. Deep state got Djene. He's literally stuck. Well, we're going to save him from being like a scene from Tron.
He has an excellent point. The fact that you don't have go ahead, draftees, you don't have this giant social footprint in terms of the casualties that come back from Afghanistan, the people who are getting killed, means that the autonomy on foreign policy and war making that the president and the military industrial bureaucratic complex here in Washington enjoys is near absolute.
Can I read you guys a statistic from this war? Over the past 18 years, more than, and this is of 2019, the end of 2019, over the past 18 years, more than 775 U.S. troops have deployed to Afghanistan, many repeatedly. Of those, 2,300 have died and 20,589 came back wounded, according to Defense Department figures. Chris Hedges has this quote. I don't know if you guys are Chris Hedges fans. He says, "The enduring attraction of war is this. Even with its destruction and carnage, it can give us what we long for in life. It can give us purpose, meaning, a reason for living. Only when we are in the midst of conflict does the shallowness and vapidness of much of our lives become apparent. Trivia dominates our conversations and increasingly our airwaves, and war is an enticing elixir. It gives us resolve, a cause. It allows us to be noble and those who have the least meaning in their lives, the impoverished refugees in Gaza, the disenfranchised North African immigrants in France, even the legions of young who live in the splendid indolence and safety of the industrialized world, are susceptible to war's appeal. That's from his so cheery book, War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning. He was a war correspondent for like 20 years.
George Orwell had a similar observation about the appeal of fascism. He said that when you look at all of the sort of nice parties in Great Britain or in Europe, even if you include the communists in this, communists promise you a better future. Socialists promise you a better future. Liberals promise you a better future. Conservatives promise you at least that things won't get worse, while fascists promise you a bloody, horrific death fighting your race enemy in some remote and distant land. And turns out that not only is there a huge appeal for that fascist message, which I ask for nothing from you but your lives and your bodies, and I promise you nothing but glorious death. That support, that attraction comes from the people who are actually going to be paying that price. There is this romance, especially for young men, of the beautiful death, the glorious struggle, the meaningful struggle, and it gets embodied in the culture of the military, the idea of comradeship, the ritual, the structure of it. There's a very strong attraction there, and the United States has managed to do this awesome trick of tapping into that feeling through American exceptionalism, through supporting the troops, through just this feeling of the military being everywhere, while at the same time outsourcing all the suffering and dying to a very small subsegment of the population that a lot of people have very little contact with. So you get the upside of purpose and romance and moral authority, while letting some poor schmuck from Ohio do your dying for you.
The thing I found interesting in what you just said about all of the rituals and cultural appeals of the military, and to the gendered nature of what you're saying, is that it's very much in line with some of the romanticized way in which fascism appeals to youth, particularly young men.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that it's a very similar appeal. It's a very similar mechanism. The content of it. Matt Iglesias, of all people, made this really trenchant observation that when you look at Republican campaign ads, they always talk about freedom, that America is about freedom. That's what makes America great. Freedom, freedom, liberty, freedom. And the content of the ads, what they actually show, is U.S. military, police, firefighters, industrial workers, farmers, nuclear families of a very traditional stripe, maybe some religious imagery, and then like the Grand Canyon, and then an eagle, and then a flag. The content actually refers not at all to individual freedom, not at all to the ability to sort of pick an unconventional life, to do something different, to chart your own course. It's all just, these are the conservative institutions of order, protection, of authority. This is the traditional culture. So you dress up in the language of liberation, the substance of tradition.
Yeah, and I think that's like a very powerful thing to many Americans. Like these national symbols and the way that they're connected together have a huge appeal. And I think, to return to Afghanistan, we're coming up to this point where it seems that, there's an end in sight. There's been deadlines. I know Joe Biden specifically said, it's going to be hard to meet the deadline for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But I think this raises a really big question about, will the United States actually withdraw? Even if they don't meet the deadline, will we be seeing a withdrawal over the summer? And I don't really know, because, on one level, I think the war itself has a momentum. There's the sunken cost fallacy. The United States has, sunk an enormous amount of blood and treasure into Afghanistan. And a withdrawal, I think many people realize, will be, at the very least, look like a political defeat, because we will probably see anti-American forces seizing power in the country. And I think there's an enormous amount of sort of ideological infrastructure that's being deployed at the moment to try and halt a withdrawal. So, as is in the case very often with imperial projects, you have, women's rights being deployed to justify an ongoing occupation. It's not too different from the British in the 19th century in India, sort of portraying their mission in India as a civilizing mission, where they were going to go and liberate Hindu women from the barbaric practice of widow burning. And, today we see many observers saying that, if the United States withdraws, women's rights in Afghanistan will be set back. And that may well be very true. So I think we have this kind of sunken cost fallacy. We have this kind of ideological sort of liberal internationalist ideology, human rights discourse that is being used to sustain the occupation. But I just wondered, are we seeing, is there a strategic reason for this? Is there beyond the kind of sunken costs and the fact that, America doesn't want to be seen to be defeated in Afghanistan, is a continued occupation of Afghanistan viewed within a broader geopolitical question of strategy?
So what about the pipelines?
That's an interesting point. The Biden came in, and just like Trump before him and Obama before him, there's this momentum to just finally call it. Let's leave Afghanistan, win or lose. It's just not worth it anymore. We've done what we could. Let's cut our losses. And during a major briefing on the future of his Afghanistan policy, the details of the meeting were leaked. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, was reported to have made an impassioned appeal to just give Afghanistan some more time. And he cited that he didn't have a geopolitical or a strategic argument for it. It was a combination of responsibility to protect style human rights rhetoric. Women's rights are going to go back to the Stone Age. You're going to destroy all of the progress that we've made on human rights. The Taliban, these evil, no good, throat-slitting terrorists are going to take over, and you're going to finally, with this kind of like appeal to the holy dead of the U.S. military, you're going to have squandered the lives and the futures, the sacrifice that all of these thousands of American servicemen and women have made. So please, can we have some more American servicemen and women to sacrifice to keep this thing going? There was also no real plan put in place to improve the situation. Indeed, it's unclear if you break the agreement, which is remove all troops by
May 1st.
By May 1st.
May 1st.
By, let's say, May. And then what you get from the Taliban is Scouts honor. We're not going to let Al-Qaeda or ISIS use our territory. And we're going to play nice with the government of Afghanistan, until we don't. It's unclear how you're going to get a better deal from that, right? They've demonstrated that they can take whatever you dish out. They've been increasing their territorial footprint. The government of Kabul, the pro-American government, it takes them forever just to decide who won an election. It takes them forever to form a cabinet. They kind of hate each other. And that system that's been created, like the gentleman in the turban from our opening clip said, was created by the Americans and fails to actually deliver any of the security or prosperity that Afghans were promised. So there's no real kind of civic legitimacy in place for them. So why even stick around? Like, what are you going to accomplish? But no, all you had was this emotional appeal to honor the war dead, and won't somebody please think of the women and girls. And when they say emotional, it's supposed to, I think it's supposed to be like that he was like manly and angry, but I prefer to think of him just like weeping like a bitch, like the this 4-star general, right? Like
I think Pascal wants to ask you a question.
No, actually, I want to go to an article. This is from a June 2010 article in the New York Times. U.S. identifies vast mineral riches in Afghanistan. The United States has discovered nearly 1 trillion in untapped mineral deposits in Afghanistan, far beyond any previously known reserves, and enough to fundamentally alter the Afghan economy and perhaps the Afghan war itself, according to the senior American government officials. The previously unknown deposits, including huge veins of iron, copper, cobalt, gold, and critical industrial metals like lithium, are so big and include so many minerals that are essential to modern industry that Afghanistan could eventually be transformed into one of the most important mining centers in the world, the United States officials believe. And integral. What were you going to say?
I remember that report. I was working on Afghanistan when that came out, and it's not false. It's not like lies in the sense that Afghanistan is a very large country and there's all kinds of rocks underneath it, and a lot of them are valuable. But it's also completely overblown. Most countries have got substantial mineral wealth in one form or another. The question is, how feasible is it to get at it? If you spend, and the United States is basically almost at the loss-making point anyway. If you got $1 trillion worth of value out of all of those minerals, you've spent almost $1 trillion worth of value just to get Afghanistan. You'd have been better off just buying them from the Taliban. But when you have projects or proposals or some strategy that you need to get approved by the guy with one more star than you, you have to bring some kind of justification, right? Like this time it'll work. And one of the tools of government management is the sort of break-even assessment, costs and balances, all these kinds of things, where you need to demonstrate economic outputs from your proposal that are going to cover the costs of executing it. This report is something that was probably ginned up in order to create the illusion that there might be a positive sum economic outcome from controlling Afghanistan. Then everybody cites it and says, "Oh, it'll be so great when we run this thing," but it's actually just a talking point that can get built into PowerPoint decks that are delivered one rung up the chain of command. I think there is a sort of geopolitical justification for America sticking around, and that's actually to play spoiler. The Afghanistan, ultimately, the value lies in your ability to connect the center of Eurasia with the Indian Ocean and with the Middle East. Right now, if you're playing Risk, it would be one of those solid lines where you can't move armies across, just because of the terrain, just because of the lack of infrastructure. It served as an excellent buffer, keeping the Soviet Union out of India and out of the Middle East. Right now, it's also a helpful way of boxing in China. And if you had a Taliban government, and there is this sneaking suspicion, there's no basis behind it, but a lot of American military industrial bureaucratic figures absolutely believe it, that since the Taliban don't like us, the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and everybody must be working with the Taliban to come after us. And I think that if there is a geopolitical rationale, it's to deny Russia and especially China an ability to create a overland transportation corridor that would bring them into the heart of the Middle East and into South Asia.
Does that answer your question?
I mean, my larger question is that are we trying to say that the United States is involved in this 20-year war without any kind of material economic motivation besides the fact of, we basically want to manage the political terrain there? What about the pipelines, the TAPI pipeline that has been recently completed there that was a major, extension of natural, fossil fuels throughout the region?
Well,
go ahead.
What people miss was that during the 1990s, it's not that America had, there was Operation Infinite Reach in, I think, 98, where Bill Clinton shot some missiles off after the embassy bombings in Africa. But American policy through Pakistan leaned towards the Taliban because the Taliban were opposed to Iran. So you had this dynamic that there was already discussion that a pipeline could be driven through Afghanistan in order to sort of bring Central Asian gas, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, out towards Pakistan rather than going through Iran. So there's been geopolitical discussions about Afghanistan, but I think when we look at imperial policy, economic rationale and motivations certainly play a part, but I think we have to take security rationale as well. The British invaded Afghanistan numerous times during their long rule in India. Those invasions were not driven by the enormous mineral and economic wealth of Afghanistan itself, but rather to block Russian imperial expansion southwards, what they used to call the Great Game, the kind of contest between the United Kingdom and the Russian Empire in the 19th century. So I think it's important to kind of bear in mind that when we look at imperial projects, they are not always, particular manifestations of an imperial project are not always dictated by very specific economic factors, but rather security factors that, of course, relate to a whole set of other factors, which, of course, are rooted in the maintenance of a broader imperial system, the desire to protect empire. And I think again, Kuba mentioned it, and I think it bears, it's speculation, but it bears thinking about, a desire to remain in Afghanistan may be seen as a sort of necessary geopolitical move in order to obstruct the Belt and Road Initiative. You have China driving through, enormous infrastructure projects and really quite impressive infrastructure projects across Eurasia, in Africa, and places like that. There is no reason why you couldn't drive a railway through Afghanistan. There's no reason why Chinese engineers could not connect up with countries like Iran and go all the way to the Mediterranean Sea through Turkey. There's already, trade links being created. And basically, in doing so, China will strengthen its geopolitical position by making itself immune from sort of naval blockades, by tying the sort of Central Asian the inner Asian sort of wealth of resources to its sphere of influence as the Chinese economy grows. So I think, yes, I think when you're looking at the sort of question of lithium and things like that, I think that's probably, I don't think that's the main thing. I think it's more part of a sort of geopolitical grand politics game being played between, China and or at least between the United States and what it sees as its rising Chinese rival. So, of course, there's an economic rationale to it, but I don't think it's as simple as saying, Afghanistan has these enormous natural resources and the United States is hoping to extract them. I think it's, more, as Kuba says, to play a spoiler in order to limit the Belt and Road Initiative that is sort of integrating Eurasia into the Chinese economic sphere of influence.
Now, before we make this pivot to Turkey, I do want to say that we actually have a moderator now in the chat. The show the other day, we actually had a troll, and the way we used to do it, it was kind of fun. We would put the chat on the screen so the guests could see, and it does take away. And there's definitely panels that people do now virtually. Teray Reed was telling me, he's like, look, man, you don't want your guests to see the chat, even if your chat you think it's going to be good. Trolls sneak in, and it's very distracting, and it messes up your flow. So we have a moderator now. If you guys see him in the chat, say hello. His name is John Ross. Shout out to John. We appreciate you. There's only so much moderation I can do. So are you excited about that, Pascal, the man that doesn't smile?
Oh, man, here we go.
You didn't smile?
Yes, I'm glad we have a moderator, yes.
So we're also going to talk about Turkey on this show. And apparently a Turkish prosecutor wants to eliminate the Kurdish party. Correct, Djene?
That is correct. At present, there is a move in Turkey which is quite significant in that Turkey has often been cited as kind of the model of a inverted commas Muslim democracy for a long time. But we have, especially since 2015, and even before then, we've seen an increasing march towards authoritarianism under the leadership of President Erdogan, who was first prime minister and then became president, and then the presidency became this powerful position. So we're seeing in Turkey, a very important shift in terms of Turkey's relationship with the Kurdish community. So for a little bit of context, in 2002, there was an election in Turkey, and the Justice and Development Party, a party that has its roots in Turkey's sort of Islamist movement, a conservative movement, came to power. And, the first decade of the Justice and Development Party's tenure in Turkey was characterized by liberalization politically, opening up to the Kurdish question, and an attempt to negotiate a peaceful solution to the Kurdish question, which had turned violent at various points in Turkey's history. But the most recent point was in 1984 with the emergence of the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Now, alongside the rise of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which was an insurgent group, you had the emergence of a parliamentary movement. And this sort of takes off in the 1990s. And we have sort of several iterations of Kurdish political parties that are periodically shut down by the Turkish Constitutional Court on the grounds that they're separatists or that they have links with terrorism. But when the last party was shut down, which was, I think, 2009, the DTP, Erdogan spoke out against this and said this was, not a good thing. We should have a parliamentary group. However, in 2015, the pro-Kurdish political party, the HDP, was actually able to transform itself from being a sort of Kurdish-orientated political party to being a general left-wing party that incorporated sort of radical leftism, LGBTQ rights, trade unionists, all kinds of sort of anti-systematic groups in Turkey. So it sort of transformed itself from a sort of nationalist organization, or at least an organization that had its roots in nationalism, to a sort of general left-wing party, and enjoyed an enormous amount of electoral success, at least comparatively. And the outcome of this was that Erdogan in 2017 lost his, parliamentary majority. And in response, Erdogan made a shift towards the sort of more nationalist, hardline, anti-Kurdish policy, which we don't need to go into too much detail about now, but it has involved both repression at home, the removal of elected Kurdish officials across the local governments in the predominantly Kurdish southeast of Turkey. It's also involved military operations in Syria against Kurdish groups there, which Turkey, not totally unjustly sees as having links with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, this insurgent group. But, at the same time, there is being a brutal sort of legal assault on the leadership of the sort of left-wing party, the pro-Kurdish party, the HDP. Its co-leaders, including Salahdin Demirtas, have been imprisoned on trumped-up charges. As I mentioned, local government officials have been removed from office. And this has not necessarily helped Erdogan. So in recent municipal elections, for example, Erdogan lost control of both Istanbul and Ankara for the first time in 20 years to the largest opposition party, the CHP, the Republican People's Party. And one of the reasons they lost it was because supporters of the HDP and the pro-Kurdish groups swung behind the opposition. So you have this sort of burgeoning sort of anti-Erdogan alliance taking place in Turkey. And in response, there's been a big drive to repress the HDP, which has now culminated in a Turkish prosecutor with the nod of Erdogan, opening a case to shut down the HDP. And not only shut down the HDP, Kurdish parties have been periodically shut down in Turkey, but ban over 600 members of that party from running from office. So in order to basically eliminate them completely from the Turkish political system, which has two effects. Firstly, it splits the opposition. Anti-Kurdism and sort of the conflation of any expression of Kurdish cultural distinctiveness with what Turkish nationalists see as separatist terrorism, splits the opposition between those who are anti-Kurdish and those who are sort of have a softer line. So it makes it more difficult for the opposition to consolidate. And at the same time, it consolidates Erdogan's rule. He's formed an alliance with basically a fascist party, the National Action Party, and it consolidates that nationalist wing of Turkish politics while at the same time fracturing the opposition and making it difficult for them to respond, even as Erdogan's political fortunes wane because the economic growth of Turkey has stalled. The economy is in the doldrums. Unemployment has grown. There's, coronavirus that's hit the country, but also there've been a whole host of sort of political problems. In 2016, there was an attempted coup, and following that coup, not only were people, who were involved in the coup, arrested, but, thousands of people on the sort of pettiest charges were removed from their jobs in teaching and universities. There's a huge brain drain in Turkey. A whole generation of intellectuals are leaving the country. So Turkey is in a real pickle, and the response of the Turkish government has been to shift more and more to an authoritarian mode of operation, where they keep the forms of democracy, but basically, one of the things you can say about Turkey is that it has a long tradition of parliamentary government, interspersed with sort of one-party rule and military interventions. But there is a tradition of competitive elections in Turkey going back to the late Ottoman period. But we're seeing a kind of shift away from the kind of a more pluralistic, open Turkey, a push pioneered by sort of so-called liberal Islamists, to a more authoritarian mode where, basically Turkey doesn't become a one-party state. There are still elections, but in practice, the AKP sort of maintains itself under the leadership of Erdogan as a kind of de facto one-party state. And this is significant because Turkey is increasingly taking an aggressive foreign policy stance. They're involved in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Azerbaijan-Armenia war, in Libya, in Syria. And, they're able to pursue this aggressive foreign policy precisely because they're in the American sort of alliance system. But they're increasingly trying to strike out a kind of independent path, which is very destabilizing. If Turkey pursued the same foreign policy as it does now, but had a kind of regime that was orientated towards the United States like Iran would, it would be enemy number one. At the moment, they're able to exploit their position within the American imperial system to engage in kind of foreign policy adventurism. But it remains to be seen, what direction Turkey will take and how far they will go towards an authoritarian system and breaking from the American political system.
50 years of NATO dues are really paying off.
Yeah, they're really paying off. It really, there's a lot of cosplay anti-imperialism in Turkey, a lot of big shouting about America, but their army is armed by the United States. Their fight against the PKK has been supported with US intelligence. So, Turkey and Erdogan are extremely adept at using anti-imperialist language at home to justify sort of their rule, to say that they're standing up to America, while at the same time internationally, playing the card of, we're a NATO ally. Why don't you support a NATO ally? They talk a big game about Israel, but at the same time, they have military partnerships with Israel, trade with Israel. A decade ago, they were crying about Gaza, while at the very same time as complaining about the Mavi Marmara thing, they were buying Israel's Heron drones off them. So Turkey plays a very, very smart game of what I like to call cosplay anti-imperialism.
Pascal wants to ask you a question, Gene.
Yeah, one of the things I've always found fascinating about Turkey is that, in the Muslim community, particularly among those who are sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood type formations, Turkey has always been viewed as some kind of perfect model of the Islamic civilization or society in the modern times, because Erdogan, is considered to be, trying to maintain a certain kind of Islamic orthodoxy and so on and so forth. And my critique of that posture has always been, I was like, Erdogan is the house Muslim to the United States, man. He's basically there, he's, he's their punk, and I've always found it kind of like incredible to me to find people in these communities who are always, complaining about the role of American imperialism in the Muslim world, who find some type of solace in Erdogan's Turkey. And I was like, he's their house Muslim, man. I don't understand why people applaud this guy.
But it's like Robert the Bruce in Braveheart, right? Like, he's not as charismatic. He's not the first mover like William Wallace. He's kind of the bitch of Edward Longshanks. But ultimately, that position allows him to incubate enough of his own authority, enough of his own power base, enough resources, enough of a military infrastructure behind him, force of arms, so that you go from being house Muslim to being master of the harem, and by kicking out the old master, and you grow from the inside your strength to be able to do that. And frankly, from a NATO perspective, Turkey they should have been kicked out 10 years ago, right? They're just a spoiler now. They're just trouble. They don't cooperate with any of NATO's purported larger regional objectives. They strike out on their own. There's no coordination with European allies. The only thing that Turkey has going for it is basically being a traffic light for refugees. You got to keep it flashing red. Otherwise, you're going to have another million people marching into Germany. And that lets him keep the Europeans, quiet and well behaved. But the truth is that it absolutely toxic player for any kind of Western foreign policy in the region, if you care about Western foreign policy working.
And when we talk domestically, what we've seen when the AKP came to power, they came to power after a decade of great political instability as a clean hands administration, as an administration that was seen as uncorrupt and that was seen as working for the people. And to a certain extent, they delivered on a lot of their policies. There was a lot of exaggeration about Turkey's economic success, but there was a significant economic transformation. You have the formation of a bourgeoisie, a national bourgeoisie in Turkey. You have under AKP's rule, and significant increases in at least the lifestyle of the middle classes, and also in the sort of peripheral classes that had flooded the cities in the 1990s and were now, they did like modernization projects and things like that. A lot of things were on finance, but, there was a consumer boom. But Erdogan in power has become increasingly corrupt. They built this sort of $1 billion palace, and many of his now there's a growing divide in the Islamic community in Turkey, saying that Erdogan has become like a corrupt sultan, and the sort of the old kind of revolutionary kind of and I don't mean this in the Islamic kind of more socialistic wing of the Islamic movement that saw the AKP as going against not only moral corruption but also economic corruption. These people are alienated. The AKP are having iftar meals that cost $1,000 while people are unemployed outside. So you have this. You have Erdogan playing a lot of symbolism in Turkey, using this kind of neo-Ottoman discourse, neo-Selçukid discourse to kind of legitimize himself, using Islam. But at the core, the sort of Islamic appeal in Turkey is an Islamism that is fundamentally integrated with Turkish nationalism. That is, Islam is a function of Turkish nationalism, and the Turks are the best, most civilized, most educated Muslims. And we see this in, for example, the best of Islam. They had this huge Fethullah Gulen movement, which has now fallen out with the AKP government. But they did missionary work all around Africa, and wanted to export Turkish culture. And they would have these like Turkish Olympiads where they would get kids from Senegal and get them to recite Turkish nationalist poetries, and Erdogan would clap and for the performing Africans and East Asians who would come to pay homage to superior Turkish civilization. There's very much a Turkish Muslim burden, not only towards groups like the Kurds, but also to Muslims around the world. And Erdogan, some groups have bought into it. Some of the Syrian opposition bought into it, but a lot of people are kind of sick of it now. And I have seen this tendency among some American Muslims to see Erdogan as a sort of paragon of political leadership. But I think that comes from Erdogan's symbolism rather than a depth or a knowledge about what actually is taking place in Turkey.
Well, I will stop you guys right there, because we had long talks all day and yesterday about today, and a lot of these shows sometimes they go a little long. As you guys know, we do give these shows to Zero Books. They've been showing them. They're going to show one Friday. They're going to show our Preston Smith interview Friday. So another thing that we finally set up is, now that our Patreon community has grown way larger than I ever could have imagined when I first started doing this thing, we're going to do this second half where we're going to talk more about Erdogan being a house Muslim. We're going to get into maternity suits and the U.S. Air Force. I actually did find a image for that is the screen, the thumbnail for the patron only thing of a woman in a flight suit that's pregnant. We're also going to read from one of Pascal's favorite books.
Oh, no, not that. Ibrahim Kendi.
So if you haven't done it yet, become a patron. I put links in the chat to become a patron. Give us about 10 minutes. We're going to go right on over. If you're already a patron, I sent out a post, and I'll send out messages again for you guys to have the patron only link to this chat. I'm actually very excited for it. We're gonna talk very little. Let's start off with a very short Tucker Carlson clip that Kuba made us watch, and then we will get into the fun. So thank you guys for tuning in. John Ross, thank you very much. Kuba and Djene, hang on. Pascal Robert, is the scowl ready? Did you read the chat about people talking about basically you're like intellectual Thanos?
Yeah, I saw that.
You got to make him the Infinity Gauntlet.
How can we do a smart Affinity Gauntlet, or do we just give him the Infinity Gauntlet?
Yeah. Like each stone will be a different like rival ideology that he's crushed, right? There will be the Ta-Nehisi stone.
The Umar Johnson stone.
Oh man, here we go.
The Robin DiAngelo stone. The tap water stone.
Yep. And like there'll have to be one spot that's empty because Pascal would just be too powerful if we gave him the complete thing.
The final stone.
Snap his fingers.
The Obama stone.
Who knows what would happen?
The Obama
Stone, yeah.
The Obama stone.
That one is still out there, right?
That's still
That
out
one
there.
needs
He
to
has
be-
all of them, but the
Yeah.
Obama.
Jason is thoroughly entertained by it.
I'm hoping if you're real, you will give Joanna the power to make a meme of Pascal as Thanos snapping his fingers, and then all those people we just named going to dust. So if you're real, because they made a meme of you with the eyebrow.
Yeah, so
They made a meme. Oh my god, that shit had me on the Tim Wise stones. All right, I gotta stop. We're gonna stop. Become a patron. See this shit in the after hours, because for these East Coast motherfuckers, it's after hours.